Welcome back. It is 20 till 7 here on your Friday morning. The discussions heated up once again this week with Congress kicking around the idea of banning TikTok in the U.S. There are a lot of layers to this, from targeting one specific company to First Amendment rights to the number of people who actually make a living using that platform. So we're breaking it all down for you this morning. For Legally Speaking, attorney Brian Kopp is here with us this week. Brian, good to see you as always.
Good morning. Seems like here we go again with this.
I know, right?
Yes.
Like the ebb and flow, and now we're back at a peak talking about it again with the House moving legislation onto the Senate now. So how unique is this idea, especially targeting a company with legislation?
Well, you know, you see a lot of regulatory issues when you're a lawyer, but rarely do you see something that's so close to what we know as First Amendment rights being targeted so broadly. And it's behind the guise of national security, which I understand, but at the same time, if you look at historic Supreme Court law, it is really hard for a law like this to see its way through to survival at the end of the day. There'll be many court challenges to this.
You mentioned First Amendment, too, and, and that's the argument that the CEO of TikTok is making, too, that people have the right to seek out this information, to express themselves. Is that the case? I mean, obviously the First Amendment wasn't written with social media in mind.
That's the thing about a document that was so brilliantly written, a couple hundred years ago, is that it's pragmatic in how it's looked at. And when you hear about judicial activism, it's usually because somebody doesn't like how judges have ruled, as opposed to looking at what they're trying to interpret. So here with First Amendment rights, going all the way back to my law school days, because rarely do lawyers see Supreme Court challenges of this nature, you're talking about a test that we call strict scrutiny. And my law professor used to say strict in theory, fatal in fact, which means if you were subject to strict scrutiny as a legislative act, it was almost impossible to get over that hurdle. But there are situations out there. We take great steps to protect youth from certain things. Up until about 40 years ago, lawyers weren't allowed to advertise. So you see things as far as First Amendment goes that over the course of time, the pendulum, like you said, has swung. We've been free, we've hunkered down, times of war, times of national security, but usually, as long as it stays away from content and just is time, place, and manner of the restriction, you can do that. That's why protests need permits and things like that. But this is so broad. But they did get creative in this one. They're saying you can't sell it unless a non-Chinese entity owns it. So that's an interesting twist.
That is interesting. And another thing that I mentioned earlier too is a lot of people, I mean, it's been a trend. A lot of people, this is their livelihood. I know that might sound strange to some people, but a lot of people make the vast majority of their income through TikTok videos and being a content creator. So would they have a leg to stand on if they came back and said, hey, you're taking away my employment?
I think that when you get to that, it's no different than the content you create here on the show. They just have a different means of getting into the public. So when you get into that, then the indirect consequences, you could be limiting speech that we want to protect the most, which is dialogue about elections, dialogue about law, things that are important to our society. And if the indirect consequence of the law is that, then boy, it's tough. It's tough.
So what's your gut feeling about this? From your legal background, what do you think? Where do you think this is going?
I don't think the law can survive without very specific information as to what the national threat is. Just looking through some things over the last couple of days because it's interesting, they say you're not going to be able to survive on the allegation that we know of secrets. It's going to have to come out at some point in time what the evidence is that they're saying is the concern at the national security level.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to watch and fascinating to see as it evolves over time. But at least now we have a little bit more information in terms of how we should be viewing this. Brian, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.